The annual gala at Beckford Enterprises was always the most anticipated event of the year. Employees prepared weeks in advance, planning their outfits, brushing up on their small talk, and making sure they were ready to impress the higher-ups. The gala was where promotions were hinted at, new projects were celebrated, and the company's finest talent was put on display. It was, in every sense, a night of glitz and ambition, a stage for the brightest stars in the office to shine. But no one expected the night's most unforgettable moment to come from the janitor. It started like any other gala night. The grand hall was buzzing with the sounds of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of applause as someone delivered a punchline or shared a proud work anecdote. The room sparkled under chandeliers, with colleagues dressed to the nines and trying to outdo one another in charm and wit. Amid the crowd of executives, managers, and rising stars was Henry, the janitor, quietly moving through the room, barely noticed. Henry had been working at Beckford Enterprises for almost 2 decades. To most, he was just the janitor. A friendly nod in the hallway or a polite thanks when he emptied trash bins was the extent of their interactions with him. He was unassuming, always clad in his gray uniform, with a mop or broom in hand. His demeanor was kind but reserved, as though he preferred to blend into the background rather than be the center of attention. And that's exactly where he stayed, until tonight. The evening was well underway, and the gala was hitting its stride. The CEO, Mr. Thompson, stood at the podium, giving his annual speech about the company's achievements and the bright future ahead. The crowd was politely attentive, though some glanced at their watches, waiting for the more exciting parts of the evening to begin. As the speech wrapped up, the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the entertainment portion of the night. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Every year, a few employees were invited to showcase their talents, whether it was singing, dancing, or performing stand-up comedy. It was a fun tradition, a way to break the ice and show off a side of themselves that didn't fit within the walls of the office. The first act was a junior marketing executive who performed a jazz number on the saxophone. The room erupted in applause as she finished, her face glowing with pride. Next up was a duet by 2 sales team members who belted out a popular pop song that had the crowd clapping along. The energy in the room was high, and everyone was enjoying themselves. Then something unexpected happened. Mr. Thompson returned to the stage and cleared his throat, signaling for quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, a slight grin on his face. "Our next performer is someone who's been with this company longer than most of us. He's always around, keeping things running smoothly, though you may not have thought much about it. Tonight, he's stepping out from behind the scenes to share something special. Please give a warm round of applause for Henry." The crowd murmured in confusion. Henry, the janitor. A few chuckles rippled through the room as heads turned, searching for him. Surely this was a joke, a comedic interlude to keep the mood light. But there he was, stepping onto the stage with a calm and steady presence, holding a battered old guitar. Henry adjusted the microphone and smiled sheepishly at the audience. "Evening, everyone," he said, his voice low but steady. "I know I'm not who you expected to see up here, but I've been working on something, and I hope you'll give me a chance." The room was still, the air thick with curiosity and doubt. Henry strummed a few chords to tune his guitar, and for a moment, the sound felt awkward against the polished elegance of the gala. A few people whispered to each other, likely speculating whether this would be a train wreck or a pleasant surprise. Then Henry began to play. The first notes filled the room, gentle and haunting. His fingers moved effortlessly across the strings, weaving a melody that seemed to wrap itself around everyone in the audience. And when he started to sing, his voice, a rich, soulful baritone, was like nothing anyone had expected. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. His song was raw, full of emotion, telling a story of resilience, gratitude, and dreams left unspoken. It wasn't just a performance. It was a glimpse into a life most of them had never taken the time to see. As Henry's voice swelled, his lyrics painted a picture of his journey. How he had once been a struggling musician, forced to set aside his dreams to support his family. How he had found a quiet dignity in his work, even as he kept his passion alive in the shadows. The song wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or trapped by circumstances. It was a reminder of the hidden talents and stories we all carry. When the final note faded into silence, the room remained still for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, like a wave, the applause began, hesitant at first, then building into a thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, their faces a mix of awe and admiration. Henry looked out at the crowd, his expression humble but deeply moved. For the first time in years, he wasn't just the janitor. He was an artist, a storyteller, a force to be reckoned with. But just as the applause began to die down, something unexpected happened. Something that would take the evening in an even more surprising direction. A man in the audience stepped forward, his hand raised to get everyone's attention. He was impeccably dressed, with the air of someone important, though few recognized him immediately. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I need to say something." The crowd turned toward him, their curiosity piqued. Henry, still standing on stage, looked slightly bewildered but nodded for the man to continue. "My name is Victor Reynolds," the man said, "and I'm a talent agent. I've worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. And let me tell you," he pointed directly at Henry, "what I just heard was nothing short of extraordinary. If you're interested, I'd like to talk about how we can share your music with the world." The room erupted into gasps and murmurs, and all eyes were back on Henry. He stood frozen for a moment, his guitar still in his hands, as the weight of Victor's words sank in. And that's where this story really begins. What happened next would change Henry's life forever, and leave everyone in that room questioning what they truly knew about the people around them. The room was still buzzing with excitement long after Victor's announcement. Some people rushed to congratulate Henry, while others whispered in small groups, trying to process what had just happened. The janitor they'd passed by every day, hardly giving a second thought, had just been offered a chance most people could only dream of. Henry, meanwhile, was still standing on the stage, clutching his guitar as though it were the only solid thing keeping him grounded. Victor climbed onto the stage and extended his hand with a smile. "You've got something special, Henry," he said. "A voice like yours shouldn't be hidden. Let's talk." Henry hesitated, his mind racing. He hadn't been in the spotlight for years, not since he put his dreams of a music career aside to take care of his family. The thought of stepping back into that world was both thrilling and terrifying. Still, he nodded, shaking Victor's hand firmly. As the night wound down, Henry found himself at the center of attention for the first time in decades. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged him before were now lining up to congratulate him, offering words of admiration and encouragement. But beneath their warm smiles, Henry could sense something else, an unease, as if his sudden rise had disrupted the unspoken hierarchy of the office. The next morning, the office was abuzz with talk of Henry's performance. Some people were genuinely happy for him, marveling at his hidden talent and cheering him on. Others, however, weren't so kind. "I mean, good for him, but let's be real. He's just a janitor," one employee said, shaking his head. "Does he even know how to handle a music career? He'll probably mess it up." "I don't know," another chimed in. "It feels weird." We're the ones working late nights and hitting deadlines, and suddenly he's the star. The murmurs of doubt and resentment spread quickly, and before long, Henry found himself walking into rooms where conversations stopped abruptly. It wasn't long before he started to feel the weight of their stares, their whispers. But Henry wasn't just battling the judgment of others. He was fighting his own doubts. That night at the gala, he'd been swept up in the magic of the moment. But now, as he sat in the break room during his lunch break, reality was setting in. Could he really step into the world of music again, after all this time? And what would happen if he failed? Victor had wasted no time, calling Henry the day after the gala to set up a meeting. They met at a small cafe downtown, where Victor laid out his vision for Henry's future. "You've got the voice and the story," Victor said, leaning forward with excitement. "People love a story of perseverance, of someone rising from the shadows to shine. We can make this happen, Henry. But it's going to take work. Are you ready for that?" Henry stared down at his coffee, his mind swimming with uncertainty. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've got a job here. I've got bills to pay. And it's been so long since I've done anything like this. What if I'm not good enough?" Victor leaned back, studying Henry carefully. "You were more than good enough on that stage," he said. "But I get it. This is a big leap. Think about it, talk to your family. But don't let fear make the decision for you." Henry nodded, grateful for Victor's patience. But the truth was, it wasn't just fear holding him back. It was responsibility. He'd taken the janitor job all those years ago because it was stable, dependable. It allowed him to provide for his family after his wife had passed away, leaving him to raise their 2 kids alone. Now both of his children were grown and living their own lives, but Henry still felt the weight of that responsibility. Could he really risk everything to chase a dream he buried so long ago? Meanwhile, back at the office, the tension was growing. Some of Henry's coworkers were supportive, but others were bitter, feeling as though his moment in the spotlight had come at their expense. One person in particular, Darren, a senior manager with a reputation for being ambitious, seemed especially bothered. He just played a song, Darren scoffed during a meeting with his team. "We're the ones who keep this place running, not him. And now everyone's acting like he's some kind of hero." Darren's resentment only grew when he overheard a conversation between Mr. Thompson and another executive. "Henry's performance was incredible," Mr. Thompson said. "It's a good reminder to never underestimate the people around us. We should find ways to celebrate everyone's contributions, not just the ones in the spotlight." The words weren't meant to be dismissive of Darren's work, but they stung nonetheless. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, doing everything he could to earn recognition, and now it felt like all anyone could talk about was the janitor. As the weeks went on, Henry found himself torn between 2 worlds. On one hand, he felt a growing pull toward the life Victor was offering, a chance to finally share his music with the world. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the growing tension at work, the judgment from some of his colleagues, and his own fears of failing. Victor had arranged a small showcase for Henry at a local music venue, inviting industry insiders and potential collaborators. It was an opportunity that could change everything, but as the date approached, Henry began to second-guess himself. What if he walked away from the stability of his job and ended up with nothing? What if the people who doubted him were right? The night of the showcase arrived, and Henry found himself backstage, his hands trembling as he tuned his guitar. The room was packed, the energy buzzing, but all he could focus on was the knot of anxiety in his stomach. Victor came to check on him, offering a reassuring smile. "You've got this," he said. "Just go out there and be yourself." Henry nodded, taking a deep breath. But just as he was about to step onto the stage, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Darren. "Good luck out there. Hope you don't regret leaving the job that actually pays the bills." The message hit Henry like a punch to the gut. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. Was Darren right? Was he about to throw away everything he'd worked so hard to build for a dream that might never come true? The stage manager signaled for him to go on, and Henry froze, caught between the weight of his doubts and the pull of his dream. The audience waited, the room buzzing with anticipation. Henry closed his eyes, gripping his guitar tightly, and took one last deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything, one way or another. Henry stood there, his guitar in hand, the weight of Darren's text pressing down on him like a storm cloud. For a moment, he considered walking away, letting his doubts and fears win. The world outside that curtain felt impossibly big, and the safety of his quiet life back at Beckford Enterprises felt tempting. But then he remembered the faces in the audience that night at the gala. The way people had stopped to truly see him, not just as the janitor, but as someone with a voice, a story. He'd already taken the first step. Now it was time to take another. He stepped onto the stage, the bright lights hitting him, the murmurs of the crowd fading into a hush. The room was packed, filled with music industry professionals, curious onlookers, and even a few of his coworkers who had come to show support, or perhaps to watch him fail. Henry adjusted the microphone, strummed his guitar, and let his eyes scan the room. He saw Victor in the back, giving him a thumbs up, and for a brief moment he smiled. The first notes of his song floated into the room, gentle and raw. As he began to sing, something inside him shifted. The fear, the doubt, it melted away with each word, each chord. He sang about dreams lost and rediscovered, about the quiet strength it took to keep going when the world seemed to forget you were there. He sang about love, loss, and hope. His voice wasn't just music, it was a story, a connection that reached out and held every single person in the room. By the time he reached the final chorus, the audience was utterly still, their eyes glued to him. When the last note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence before the room erupted into applause. It was louder, more electric than anything Henry had ever experienced. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even wiping away tears. It wasn't just a performance, it was a moment. As Henry stepped off the stage, Victor rushed over to him, grinning ear to ear. "That was it," he said, clapping Henry on the shoulder. "That was the moment. You just proved to everyone in that room, and to yourself, that you belong here." Henry felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was where he was meant to be. But not everyone was clapping. Back at the office, Darren heard about the showcase the next day. While some coworkers gushed about Henry's success, Darren couldn't hide his frustration. "He's leaving us behind," Darren muttered to a colleague. "He's going to chase fame, and when it doesn't work out, he'll come crawling back. Just watch." Yet, to Darren's surprise, Henry didn't quit his job, not immediately, at least. Instead, he found a way to balance both worlds. For months, he continued working at Beckford Enterprises, performing on weekends, and building his music career slowly but steadily. His songs began gaining traction online, and he started booking larger gigs. And while some at the office still harbored resentment, others saw a different side of Henry: his humility, his work ethic, his refusal to let success change who he was. One day, as Henry was mopping the break room floor, Darren approached him. For a moment, neither of them said anything, the air thick with unspoken tension. Finally, Darren broke the silence. "You really surprised everyone, you know," Darren said, his tone softer than Henry expected. "I didn't think you'd make it this far." Henry looked up, a small smile on his face. I didn't either, he admitted. But I guess that's the thing about dreams. You don't always have to chase them all at once. Sometimes you just take it one step at a time. Darren nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Well, good luck out there. I mean it. As the weeks turned into months, Henry's career continued to grow. Eventually, the day came when he decided to leave Beckford Enterprises for good. His coworkers threw him a farewell party, and even Darren offered a handshake and a genuine congrats. Henry's departure wasn't just about leaving a job. It was about stepping fully into a new chapter of his life. He went on to release his first album, filled with songs that told the stories of his life, the struggles, the triumphs, and the people who had shaped his journey. His music resonated with audiences around the world, and he became a symbol of perseverance and the power of hidden potential. Years later, as he stood on the stage of a sold-out concert, Henry took a moment to look out at the crowd. He thought about that night at the Gala, the moment Victor had taken a chance on him, and the text from Darren that had nearly made him walk away. He thought about all the quiet nights he'd spent dreaming of this moment, wondering if it would ever come. And now, here he was, proof that it's never too late to be seen, to be heard, to chase what sets your soul on fire. As he strummed the first notes of his final song that night, Henry's voice carried a message that was as much for himself as it was for everyone listening. Sometimes the people you overlook are the ones with the most to give. And sometimes the person you doubt the most is yourself. But when you take that leap, when you let your true self shine, you might just surprise everyone, including yourself.